Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. And always a highlight of the show is when I go down to South Africa, albeit virtually, to hook up with the wonderful news from Errol Musk. How are you, Errol?
I'm good, thank you.
And what I
How are you?
love, I'm surviving. I'm surviving these extraordinary times. Now, you talk about extraordinary times, and you've met some extraordinary people in your time, such as Howard Hughes and Henry Kissinger. Could you share some of those personal stories or memorable experiences from those encounters?
Yes, I can. I mean, obviously, through life, for me at any rate, it's been quite important to, you know, try and find out who the movers and shakers are, who the people are that made a difference, and so forth. And you know, um, I found myself doing that at a very young age, and on a couple of occasions, on a few occasions, I've met some extraordinary people. South Africa had some extraordinary people. You know, the last vestiges of the of apartheid. I mean, the last vestiges of colonialism. Let's put it like that: colonialism, where white hegemony was the thing, and these were men who had grown up in that world that I met when I was a young boy. And of course, these men were born possibly, at the turn of the last century. They were all born in the early 1900s, so 1902, 1903. And so it's wrong to, sort of, sort of criminalize them or something as regards the ideas that they had, regarding the way the world was, because that's the way the world was in those days. And they, of course, fought for the old world, until their whole lives, until they were old men. And so I met a lot of them, and they were extraordinary people, extraordinary men in all respects, not simply in who they were, the things they did, and how they lived. Anyway, then of course there are those people who are absolutely sort of superstars. And on one occasion, as a young boy, I started working as a consulting engineer at a very young age. And the reason was the firm that I worked for went bankrupt. It was a British firm, or not bankrupt, but they went bankrupt, or they had some sort of problem in South Africa. So they had to close their office. And when they were
How
closed,
old were you, Errol, at that stage?
I was 23, 24, and
Right.
only just able to, well, not really. I was a year short of applying for professional status. And and I worked in this practice, and I enjoyed it. And when they said they're closing, I myself and one of the older men that was there actually suggested to them that we would like to buy their practice, mainly their library, that comes with a practice, which is quite important. And they agreed, and they sold it to us for about £6,000. No, 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 sorry. Yes, about £6,000, which was a huge amount of money in 1970. It's a huge amount of money. I mean, you could buy a brand new Rolls Royce, out of the box or something,
Right.
or an airplane for £6,000. Anyway, we bought this place, and it went on. And the older chap, who was 10 or so years older than me, he didn't like it. He didn't like the insecurity of it. I enjoyed it, and so he left, and I carried on my own. Within a couple of years, or 2 or 3 years, I was really, I had people battering on the door. I think it was simply because I was a young man prepared to take on anything. And I even managed to get my professional status brought forward, by to people that I knew. And as Elon tells people, my dad is the youngest engineer to ever achieve professional status in South Africa, which is true. And
So
because
you were 23 at that age where when you achieved that
I was
professional
about
status?
going on 23, 24 when I
Right.
managed to get the status. Anyway, I I did quite well, and I think it was because as a young man I was prepared to do anything. I was prepared to hop, skip, jump. How high? This is all I wanted to know with clients. And whereas a lot of the time in that sort of field, the people they were having.
Oh,
sorry about that.
That's all right. A dramatic moment. There you go. You survived.
Erase it?
Yeah. There you go.
Can you take that out?
Yes, yeah, we'll edit that out. Don't worry. It's always these dramatic moments. What I love is like live television. So it all looks.
I'm trying to charge.
No, it's great. I'll tell you. This is what happens. People love the bloopers. They love it when the whole thing collapses. It's gotta be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go on from where I was.
Oh no, take. So I'll bring it. So basically, you were the youngest engineer, youngest professional engineer. You got your qualifications about 23, 24, and Elon's very proud of that. He often tells people about that.
Yes.
How did that shape your outlook going forward?
Well, I mean, I was so busy at that time. I never really had time to think about it. I wasn't going to discuss this, but South Africa is quite a British sort of setup, in terms of law and order and that sort of stuff. Excuse me. And anyway, I was contacted by the engineering board, of South Africa, the engineering council rather, and I was told that I have to appear before a tribunal because I should, and the reason was that I was too young to practice as a consulting engineer.
How old were you supposed to be? I know that it's strange. There's an age limit.
I think you're supposed to have 20 years experience or something,
20 years experience. so you start when you have 3. You can tell them you were washing the cars at the age of 3. That's your great experience.
Well, the thing is, in these days, things are different. You've got major operators in their 20s working for SpaceX as senior managers, simply because they're very smart. And so things have changed. But in those days, it was like you weren't supposed to be doing that. And so I was called before this tribunal of professors and so on. And I was told that I have to give it up. I have to cancel my practice. I have to stop. Of course, I had no intention of stopping. So on the way back from this meeting in which I'd been given my marching orders, I thought, what should I do? So anyway, it came to me that I would call the one professor who had been my dean of my faculty, and I called him and I said, this is exactly what happened. I phoned him on the old telephone system, and I said, the university has done so much for me. Can't I perhaps do something for the university? And I thought this very, very august sort of man, he had honors and all sorts of things. I thought he would, sort of pick me out or say something to me like, what do you think you're doing? But anyway, he didn't. He said, yes, he said, we, with the University of the Witwatersrand, which is quite a well-known university, we cross-invigilate with them, and our lecturers are unable to pay for the fuel to get there and back. They have to go back and forward so much. It's a distance of about 40 miles. And they have to travel this distance. They don't have the money for fuel. And they're struggling. And I said, oh. And I thought immediately of a figure at the time of about £700 or £800 or £1,000, let's say, that I would give them for this, or how much more than that I had in mind, actually, but something like that. Anyway, I thought, well, so I was about to say that. He said if he could get, £50 a year, this would make, of course, not electricity, fuel in those days was about 20p a litre, it was, it was very cheap. So so I said, £100, I said, or £50, I think he said. So I said, well, in terms of rands, I said, yeah, £50. I said, okay, sure. So, of course, I immediately gave him, I think, double that. And that was the end of me ever being before any kind of tribunal ever again. In fact, this grew. And eventually this professor phoned me up and he said, look, we've always wanted to have a gold medal for our final year. We can't afford it, you see. And in those days, a gold medal cost £100. This was an ounce of gold, right. £100. And I said, well, sure, I'll give you that. And then he sort of went on. He said, he was quite smart, really, and he said, we don't have a silver medal either, or a bronze medal. So I said, okay, that's fine too. So for the next 7 or 8 years, I provided them with these things. And I also provided a scholarship for the best pre-final year student. And after about 7 or 8 years, I decided to to share the whole load with all the consulting engineers and engineers. All the various firms jumped in, and it's been a thing ever since. So the strangest thing, of course, is that on the first graduation day that followed, I was given a telephone call and asked if I wouldn't like to, if I would come to the graduation ceremony and present the medals, you see. So I thought, well, I imagine going to a class of about, the final years were always very small, of about 20, people, 20 men, or usually 20 men, young men. And I figured that there would just be 20 young men and me. And I went there in my sports jacket, and as I worked really in a sports jacket most of the time, mainly because I was always getting grease on me and stuff like that. And I got there and I couldn't find this graduation place until eventually I wound up in the main sort of amphitheater. And I opened the door and I saw this enormous crowd of about 2,000 people sitting inside. Oh, sorry. I closed the door and I rushed off, and then the door opened again and there was this man behind me, Mr. Musk, we're waiting for you. So, oh, really? So I went in and I went up on the stage and fortunately I was there with the head of the Atomic Energy Corporation and lots of other sort of august, sort of important people. And my turn to speak came quite further down the line. So I had half an hour or so to think of what the heck I was going to say. So that was the first time I presented the medals, but I was prepared for it after that.
Right.
Anyway,
do you like, just on that though, do you like public speaking? Do you like standing up and presenting awards?
No, I've always been quite shy of public speaking, but I did become a city councillor, and that completely cured me. I was terrified of my first sort of speaking in the public forum, with hundreds of people all around me and sitting in a sort of parliamentary place, sort of similar to a parliament. I was quite nervous about that the first few times, but I soon got over it because I would be tackled. And as soon as you get tackled, your blood rises and your adrenaline starts to come in, and you say, look at this, I don't care if I'm stuttering, I'm going to fight this guy, And so you get over it. You get over it.
Well, it's always interesting, Errol. I mean, people always say that at a funeral, that most people would much rather be in the coffin than they would giving the eulogy.
Oh, it's very hard to do that kind of thing if you're involved because it's emotional. But generally speaking, making a speech to people, I learned at an early age when I was a member of things like Rotary and I had to give a lot of talks that you have to prepare. You have to prepare. You can't, unless you're one of these sort of silver-tongued guys who've just done it so much, that you can do it. And I'm probably a bit in that direction these days. But you have to prepare. You have to really prepare yourself for talks. And if you don't, you must expect to be humiliated. In fact, you can be humiliated.
Yeah.
And so I learned all that sort of stuff. My 20s,
so top tips. I mean, as you say, the more that you do it, the more that you get used to doing it. So top tips for people wanting to give speeches. As you say, we start off a bit nervous, and so on and so forth. Preparation is key. Do you have notes, or do you do it off the cuff?
Well, I think if you're going to present a thing, you should have notes. Sometimes it doesn't look bad if you read off. It doesn't look good if you read off notes, and you lose your any sort of real message if you read off notes. Now you have to try and use the notes as a guide, perhaps, but if you haven't prepared, initially I found that's where your problem is. You've got to prepare, and there's no one that I imagine there are people who've perhaps got no sense of self-awareness or something and can get up and talk, but generally speaking, everybody who gets up to speak in front of a crowd is going to find their mind playing strange tricks on them, mostly saying, run, get out of here, run for your life.
It is that flight or fright, isn't it? I mean, you work on that basis.
Because I think the fear is of, saying something stupid, or I don't know what it is, but it can be very difficult initially, unless you really know the people you're talking to and all that kind of thing. But
they always say if you fail to prepare than prepare to fail. And I mean, you
Oh,
were
yes.
speaking at an early age, and you say that the first time you get up and speak is a bit nerve-wracking, but the more you do it, it's all about preparation. Does
Correct.
Elon like speaking in public?
No, he has exactly the same problem that I have, and he has had a great deal of difficulty in not sounding wooden and um, uninteresting when he's spoken. You know, many people have probably seen him talk at a Tesla event or something, and although I think he does prepare. He doesn't think of himself as particularly interesting. So these days, of course, he's much better, of course. But I mean, I'm talking about in the beginning, and he has had a lot of difficulty, just like anyone, and like me, very similar to me, shy, of saying things, and so he would mumble something often. I would say to him, next time, you must prepare, to answer questions. Or I think if you ask a person questions, then they easily answer. They have more chance, feel more confident. But just sort of speaking off the cuff is quite difficult for anybody.
Yes.
Anyway, so Elon struggles. Kimball is not. He doesn't struggle again. He's more personable, and he's able to talk to people quite easily. And Elon, no, I think he's too self-aware. But as I say, he's better now than he's ever been. And it's something that you learn. And I think it's the same with all the people who go into public office. It's all very well saying, when I get in there, I'm going to do this and this and that, and I'm going to tell them and everything. But when you stand up and you see the people around you, and you've only seen them in pictures before, or even only heard about them, and they're all staring at you, and they're not smiling, and they're staring at you. Suddenly, your voice, or you could lose your, you might choke up or something. Even I've seen that happen to people, and yeah, no, that's the thing. So it's something you have to learn, and I think there are various clubs you can go to where you can learn Toastmasters and things like
Right.
that, where they teach you to not be shy and try to talk to people. Yeah, so it's a nice thing to be able to learn to speak to people, in fact, and not feel shy, and be able to. But again, if you're not prepared, it doesn't matter who you are or how much experience you've got, you're going to come short. You must be prepared to know what it is you're going to say. Yeah. But anyway, if you would like, I'd like to tell you about interesting people that I've met, and perhaps I would start with one. As a young engineer, I received a lot of commissions, as they say. And one commission I received was for 48 blocks of flats, what we call blocks of flats. In America, they call them 10 apartment buildings.
Right.
Now, these buildings were mostly 10 stories and had 100 apartments or flats in them. Some of them were a little lower. The idea of the architects was that they were going to be built on this ridge, and they were all going to have the same top height. That creates a sort of architectural finish, you see. So some were a little higher than others, so that they all got the same height, you see. Anyway, I was appointed to do the electrical and mechanical work as a young boy, really. And so it was quite an enormous undertaking, one of the bigger ones. And anyway, I started on this, and one of the things you have to do in it is put in television. Those days we didn't have television, but we were preparing for television. I have to wire the buildings for television. And I looked up people who were doing this, and I saw that in England, there was a company called Rediffusion that was doing this kind of thing, so that you don't have a whole lot of antennas, which you have in many places in the world, sticking out of windows and all that sort of stuff. You actually just have one antenna. So I shot off to England, and I met these people, you see, and they were very nice in London, and they were going to show me some of the installations, you see, where you have one antenna, and everybody in the apartment building, be it 100 apartments or whatever, can actually tune into any station they want from that one antenna. They're not all on the same channel. They can use that antenna for up to a number of channels, and individually, or when they don't all look at the same time. You know what I mean. So anyway, so they said that we'll show you our latest installation. So I said, oh, that'd be nice. So off we went to Park Lane, I think it is.
Yes.
And we went to a new hotel called the Inn on the Park. And it had just opened. And we went in, and we went to the back of the building, and we went in a service lift up to the top floor, which is, I think it's about 6 floors. Yeah. And we got to the top, and they had apparently done this several times. And we opened the lift, the service lift door, and we entered into what I think they thought was going to be a passage, a hotel passage, but in fact was a fully carpeted a lipstick red carpet floor and lipstick red carpet walls. The most beautiful, probably Wilton carpets you can imagine in red. And I can't remember what the ceiling was. I imagine just lighting, I don't know, but it was just quite odd. And they were quite taken aback by it. And as we opened the door, we were suddenly confronted by 2 or 3 men in super-looking grey suits, you see. And their eyes shot up, and what do you want? What are you doing here? They said to us, and the 2 chaps with me, they were just engineers, dressed very informally. I had my cheap grey suit on, but anyway, they said, what are you doing here? We stood for a moment, and they sort of crowded around us, and sort of I'd stepped a couple of yards into the passage by that time. It's a wide passage, and they sort of pushed these 2 other guys back into the lift, more or less. And I was going to be pushed back into the lift when in walked from the left side a man with 2 other men in suits, grey suits, but this man had a short sleeve shirt on, and sort of those baggy pants used for athletics or something like that, and a pair of tackies or something. I didn't see what was on his feet. And he had grey hair, and he was bearded, a little bit bearded. And and I looked at him, and he said, what's going on here? Something like that. I can't remember exactly what he said. And then he said to me, who are you? And I said to him, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said, my name is Errol, and I'm a consulting engineer, and I've come to see the television distribution system in this building. I think I rattled it off very quickly because I'm putting this into buildings in South Africa, you see. And he said, oh. And everybody stood for a moment, but then suddenly I don't know if they did it by nodding or something, but they ushered these 2 other fellows from Rediffusion into the lift and took them away. And I was standing there, and he said, come with me. He said, yeah. And then I realized he was American. So he said, come with me. So I followed behind him, you see. He's wearing a short sleeve shirt with palm trees on it, like you might get in Hawaii or something like that, a Hawaiian shirt. So I followed him, and we went into a sort of bigger room, and it was all still red carpeted walls and red carpeted floor. And it had this sort of futuristic furniture in different colors, purple and orange and round, and sort of futuristic furniture. And he said, take a seat. So I sat down, and he sat down opposite me, and he said to me, tell me what you're doing. Tell me again. So I told him, you see, what I was doing. And he said, yes, well, and he went on. And then he said to me, have you ever given aviation a thought? Because I told him I'm an engineer, you see. Have you ever given aviation any thought? So I said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, I have. I bought a Piper Pacer 2 years ago, I said to him. And I've now flying it all over the country. Oh, this was like lighting a match to a firework. He was so excited, and he wanted to know all about it, how I was doing with this thing. And then he said he's also a pilot, and he said that he's the most famous. I'm the most famous pilot in the world, he said to me. I said, oh, okay. I don't know what to say, actually. I was only about 24, and I probably looked much younger. And then he said, and then they were on the wall. They had these glass-framed black and white pictures of I don't know what they looked like, bits and pieces of airplanes, really.
Right.
And so, he said, there, look at that. Those are things that I've done. And I looked at a couple of these pictures closer, And then I couldn't quite make it out. Anyway, he said that's the cowling of it. That cowling on that plane made that the fastest aeroplane in the world in 1940 or so, or 45 or something like that. Anyway, I realized this is some really important sort of guy, although I didn't know who he was. And shortly after, just at that, when we were starting to get, he asked me if I'd like a soda.
Right.
So I said, yes, I'd like a soda, because I don't want to be rude, you know. So a soda was brought to me, what he called a soda, sort of a lemony drink he gave me. And I took a couple of sips from it, and we just got into talking when these grey-suited chaps came in and stood over him and spoke to him. And then he said, I got to go. And he got up and he said, I got to go, son. And he turned around and he never said goodbye. He just said, I got to go, son. He turned his back to me and he walked off into another doorway and off. He was gone. And he'd hardly been gone a few moments when two more guys of these grey-suited types came and, hey, up you, get up. They looked at me, up. I didn't take a couple of sips of the soda, you know. And they sort of said, come. And then they took me to the lift and took me down the lift with them and then saw me out of the lift at the bottom. Of course, I was quite befuddled at that point. And I was very relieved to see when the lift door opened that the two rediffusion guys were standing in the receiving, sort of bay of the hotel, waiting for me, you know. And because I wouldn't have known how to get back at that time, really. Well, I would have, but it'd take me some trouble to get back to Kensington, where my hotel was. But anyway, I went back with him. I told them that I saw this chap. I didn't know who it was. And anyway, an interesting thing, just as an aside, when we got back to their business, I was quite surprised to see that their place was quite simple and very rudimentary, although they were working on building these panels themselves. And the lead guy said to me that, I said, this is a very small business. And I was kind of figuring, you know, how do you do big contracts from this little operation? And he seemed to be about 3 or 4 of them, and there was a woman. He said to me, we do all the wiring, we do all the panels ourselves, we build everything ourselves. And it's really much like the early days of SpaceX. And we have people who do the installations for us. So, you know, sort of trying to, he said, the reason is that, and this is quite important from England's point of view, he said, if you have more than 5 people,
right,
you have to be unionized. And we can't be unionized, because if we unionize, we won't be able to do this work. And that was quite an interesting thing to hear, that they keep their number down to below 5. They told me that. I'll never forget that. Anyway, subsequently in the newspapers, it was headlines in all the newspapers. Howard Hughes has taken the top 2 floors of the Inn on the Park hotel for his permanent sort of home in England, for when he's in England. And so I read all about him and went and got a biography, in fact, a biography that had been written, and read about him. And I thought that was quite something, that I had met this man, because very few people had ever met this man, it seems to me, certainly when he was older anyway.
Yes.
You know,
Well, so
so
certainly, I mean,
it.
all the reports about fascinating story, all the reports about him being a recluse and so on and so forth. But it was
Well, yes. And I read that he was worth $4 billion in 1944-ish, which means if you take that 4 billion and apply it now, he was wealthier than Elon is now. So in reality, in real terms, if he had been worth $4 billion in 1944, then today he would be worth something of the order of over $400 billion.
right.
So in fact, Elon is not the wealthiest person individual that has been around. It's actually Howard Hughes that was the wealthiest person. And Elon has a way to go. Now, I'm sure he will overtake Howard Hughes. But it's interesting for me that I met this extraordinary man. And there was nothing odd about him. There was nothing creepy about him. He was absolutely a proper type of guy. And the sort of guy you'd love to meet somewhere on the road or
Right.
somewhere, or some in a bar or in a restaurant. I don't know, because he's just a really nice guy.
And it is interesting, isn't it, Errol? We always talk about this, that people in the public eye and the media, they like to sort of conjure up these images of very wealthy people and say
Well,
they're
they said he was a
strange and so on and so forth.
nutcase and all that sort of thing in his biography, and that he does all sorts of weird things and he takes drugs. Well, that's all, nothing like that. There was nothing like that.
Right.
So I
And
thought I'd just,
yeah, did you stay in touch with him at all?
oh, no, 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 I had no way. I didn't even know he was. I had no way of staying in touch with him. No,
Right.
no, no.
So,
I realized I had a lucky break there of some
right.
kind. That's
Fantastic
all.
stuff.
Had a bit
They're
of a
really
lucky
good.
break.
Well, we're talking
Yes.
about a lucky break. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to find out a bit more about more of the extraordinary people you met. But for now, Errol, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.